this is funny. I was getting ready. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the Divine Masculine video. And I just felt like I had to put my hair up. Like, and actually, it's funny because this is, although these videos are timeless, at this moment in time in my journey, actually my Divine Feminine journey, have been learning to flow with, understand, and be comfortable in Divine Masculine energy. So it's actually kind of a perfect time. I've always been kind of a fluid between masculine and feminine energy, but I, in the past, did not embrace either, really. I got hooked on societal discomforts about women who are too independent or who are intelligent or able to stand within their truths. And then on the other side, being too, fitting into that masculine energy, being willing to be assertive, even aggressive, like that doesn't feel right because I am feminine. And so I rejected both sides of me. And now in my Empress path, I've learned to embrace both. And I think the irony is, even though as feminine, like we learn a great deal of self-worth, like both are learning self-worth, but we learn enough self-worth to feel confident getting on and doing a video, not worrying about our hair or a zit or whatever, but like as Divine Masculine, we learn to create that structure, that Emperor energy. Like the Emperor in the tarot deck is structure. It is the energy of the all four kings put together, just like Empress is all four queens put together. It's that calm, cool collectedness, but it's also the hunter. The feminine is gatherer. Emperor masculine is hunter. And not hunter as in, I have to go do this, I have to go do that, I have to go do this. But hunter as in, we need this to sustain the family. So I'm going to set my traps. I'm going to build fire. I'm going to learn how to process these foods. I'm going to find a balance to, to protect the young and protect my partner without being overly protective. And, being provider in a way, I mean, both masculine and feminine are providers of equal but opposite things. But learning the difference between like being a provider and being an enabler, and learning, well, I mean, self-worth. It really, that's what both Divine Masculine, Divine Feminine paths are about. It's self-sustaining self-worth. Now, I'm going to follow a similar flow to what came out for the Divine Feminine, which is about where the Divine Masculine journey starts, which is with the father. And again, it does, like, actual physical gender is not as important in this. It is, you're going to learn both, for one thing, and it is the partner who typically embodies more, masculine energy more of the time than feminine. And that doesn't mean that it's the man or the woman. Typically, it is the man. And ironically, it is usually the male partner who has not been embodying the Emperor energy, and typically the Empress is typically the woman who has been embodying the Emperor energy. Like when we are karmics, we are doing the opposites, and when we get into divine, into fitting into who we are, we become that which we have been afraid to become. In the Divine Masculine role, we learn to heal our father wounds. And okay, so like for example, I'm thinking, so similar to the mother wounds. The father wounds, that mothering tends to be more about nurturing from a societal perspective. We tend to see we tend to have grown up with families where the mother did all the caretaking for the children, all the emotional welfare, and the father went to work. And when he came home, he was tired, he had a beer, he had his chair, or father wasn't there. Maybe he was gone all the time, or maybe he had left the family. Typically, though, society does not see or value the nurturing side of the father. And we need that. We need both sides to be fully individuated and self actualized adults, emperors, and empresses. And part of the emperor path, the divine masculine path, is learning to give ourselves the nurturing, the acceptance, the appreciation that we really, the comfort that we needed from our fathers and didn't necessarily get. Because the way it's typically considered more socially acceptable in society for a man, a masculine energy, to be aggressive and reactive and just over focused on work or things of that nature than for a man to be nurturing, to be comforting, to be stable and understanding of his emotions, and to be vulnerable. This is why you'll see a lot of the, like, how to talk to a man, how to get a man to fall in love with you, all that stuff. Like the key is not in building up macho man side. I mean, yeah, there's some of that is nice, but the key is in not making him be vulnerable, but in allowing space for him to be vulnerable and to feel safe and recognize that vulnerability is strength. Because what a lot of us did not get as children was a father who could say, "I'm sorry," or a father who could say, "You're right," or a father who could say, "You know what? Yeah, you messed up. It's okay." That to receive the kind of the mother energy from the father. Like, we need both sides. Just as mother and empress energy needs to learn to let the kids run to the playground before she's ready for them to, which is an emperor type thing, the emperor needs to learn that it is okay to say, "I'd like an extra hug before you go to bed," or "I really appreciate you for cleaning up that mess." Like, we typically, when we're in divine masculine energy, well, when we're in reversed emperor energy, reversed masculine energy, we tend to think that our focus should be on the discipline. You need to follow the rules. You need to learn to become an adult. You need to do your chores. You need to listen to your mother. You need to do this and do this and do this and do this. And we just, like, I mean, this happens with men and women when we're in this reversed emperor energy. It's like, now, 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 and with no irony, I embodied that for a long time. I was a yeller. I had all sorts of rules and standards and things that the kids needed to do because I wanted them to be self-sufficient adults, and I didn't want to be seen as an imbalanced parent, and I set up situations to where I was very much alone in the parenting because I was so aggressive about it. And in embracing the Empress energy over time, that softened. And I was able to recognize that the best way to help my kids be well-rounded individuals was to be a good example of it, and to recognize their personhood and their identity, and to work on my personhood and my identity, and to be unconditionally loving of them, to help them see that, yes, if you make a mess or you're a jerk or whatever, you're gonna have consequences for that, and it's important you're accountable for them. But that doesn't mean that you're forever stained by that. It doesn't mean that you're a horrible, awful person. It doesn't mean I'm going to throw you to the wolves. I'm right here with you. This is your responsibility, and this is, yours to clean up. How would you like to do it? which, with all irony, is the divine masculine side. And so, just like with divine feminine and empress, as emperors, we first, we grow up, we're more attached to the mother. We don't really even recognize, like, we recognize the father. If our dad wasn't there, we recognize he wasn't there, whether physically or if he died, or if he was alcoholic or a workaholic. Somehow he was not there. We recognize that absence. And if he was there, we recognize him as there, but we still, in our formative years, we're more attached to the mother. So the father role, it's important, it's vital. I'm not saying it's not important. Just as humans, we tend to start from the mother. And then as we get older, we start to recognize the father more and more and more. And just like with our mother wounds, we tend to take on our father wounds. If our fathers were in many toxic relationships, or our fathers they didn't feel safe being vulnerable, or they didn't feel safe saying, no, I am worthy of this, or no, I am worthy of not having that happen to me. We take that on, and if our fathers or the father figures that appear in our life, because one way or another we get both mother figures and father figures, this is part of the divine path in general. If they were abusive, it's often that they were abused, and they put that onto us, and we take that on. If they were constantly about rules and criticism and things of that nature, or even, even if our mothers did those things, that still becomes part of a father wound. Because one of the biggest things of father wounds is that acceptance for who we are as ourselves, to be recognized by the father as somebody who is doing good, who is acceptable, with flaws included. And as we grow up and we take on the ancestral traumas and the personal traumas and the father wound stuff of our fathers, then we start to try to separate ourselves from our fathers too. For example, for me, my dad, who's like an Aries sun with an Aquarius rising, is very self-focused for the most part. I grew up, he's an alcoholic, and, so he's in codependent relationship with my mother, and so looking at that from an unhealed place for a long time, I saw him as somebody who didn't have empathy for anybody else, who wasn't able to, like, he would say that he was doing stuff for everybody, he just wanted to help, and he just wanted to provide, but he wanted to do it his own way. And if you tried to say, hey, I'm happy to take on part of that burden, it was no, I'm going to do it myself, which really can feel very undermining, and then him and mom would fight and be like, you have to give somebody a chance, you have to give her a chance to do it. But then it's like a loaded opportunity. Like, he'll give you something that's almost too hard for you, and knowing that you're not going to be able to do it the way that he would do it, and then criticizing you for not doing it the way that he would do it. And he was definitely somebody that, at least up until recently, never apologized for anything, never admitted to any wrongs for anything, and never, I don't know, I suppose that's good enough in its own stage. But he was definitely Emperor reversed for a long time. And I didn't want to be like that. I didn't want to be with somebody who was like that either. But just like with mother wound stuff, to where, we see the things that we don't like about what our mothers did. We see the things about our fathers we didn't like about what they did. If they never said they were sorry, we want to make sure we're a person that says we're sorry. If they weren't somebody who was influenceable, we want to be influenceable. If they abandoned us, we don't ever want to abandon our families and our children. If they were locked in alcoholism or workaholism or codependence, we don't want to do those things. But we typically look at it like, especially if you are more so in the masculine energy and or are a man, you typically look at it like you want to make sure you're with the right partner, sort of thing. Like you do the external thing, just like feminines do with the mother. And for a long time, just like I was interpreting that the thing that went wrong for my mom was choosing a partner that wasn't reciprocal of her desires. I thought that my father was the type of person that, I want to say, faked it and stuck around for codependent reasons. Like, it was comfortable, it was safe, it was known, and they had me. I'm an only child. I was adopted, so it. I looked at it as unhealthy, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to either be with someone or be someone who would stay in relationship just for that reason, to be someone who's just there. But then, so we go through learning the father, taking on the father's wounds, developing our own father wounds, and then trying to separate ourselves, trying to individuate ourselves and say, I am not my father. I am not those bad things. And oftentimes we can become aggressive in our pursuit to not do that. That's part of how you can recognize it's unhealed. And then when you make enough messes, basically embodying like reversed empress energy more than anything. Like, you don't stand in your truth. You don't, like, my father was very aggressive for a while, so it was stand down in that, or there were other times when he wouldn't say anything, and he would just, he would ignore my mom and do what he wanted anyways, but he wouldn't say anything to not cause a fight, to not have conflict, and it was like, that's, no, I don't want to do that. So you go opposite. But then when you start to recognize, or, just you start to call the healing path to you of divine masculine, and you really want to be, I'm just going to say divine, like you want to be a healthy partner, you want to be a healthy father or healthy mother, you want to be an important part of a role, you want to feel needed in healthy ways, not needed for your money, not needed for your resources or your crown or things like that, then you start to go back and look, you start to get faced with effectively the choice of, do you become your father to avoid working on yourself, or do you look back at your father wounds and all the people that have played father roles and the ways that you have been masculine, and do you look at how you have already been like your father, just in the act of trying to avoid being your father, which we do as feminines too, and trying to avoid becoming our mothers, we become like them. And then, do you run from that? Do you beat yourself up on that? Or do you embrace it and say, you know what, I have been, and I learned those lessons, and then you develop an understanding for your father, a compassion and empathy, and you remove the judgment, and you start to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to embrace that I have those pieces, and they are important pieces of me. And then you transmute the negative sides of things, and you start to actually free yourself up to become a new masculine. And that's when the divine masculine path starts. And often, often you've already met your divine feminine, and because you reflect each other, you probably both made some huge messes together. And when you wake up from being karmic yourself to them, to another, typically the divine masculine path, whereas the divine feminine path is to well, both people need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet and be self-sustaining, but what seems to be a common pattern, especially recently, is the divine feminines who are ready for the healing path will be put in a situation where they're alone. And in terms of their divine partner, they get faced with abandonment and things like that. Now, divine masculine does get faced with those, but because because men in particular are often conditioned to feel like it is not okay to slow down and self-care and process emotions and be compassionate and empathetic, usually the pattern seems to be for a lot of masculines is to jump into another relationship, to continue to blame the feminine, which actually, this is why it's important not to beat up on yourself. It's actually helpful, as you play that out, because you play out things, with your karmics that you cannot heal with your divine feminine. And they are things that need to be healed: mother wounds, father wounds, ancestral traumas, and things like that. And they're things like, don't feel bad on the karmic you're playing that out with either, because they got called to you because they needed to work that stuff out too. So any amount of mess made, or any amount of karma played out, any amount of triggers that happened, they were necessary for both of you. Both of you are becoming divine. And as you, as masculine, get really deep into your dark night of soul energy, and you just become the biggest jerk you've ever frickin' known, it's humbling. And it's also humbling for your divine feminine, who in each moment that you make those choices has to decide for herself also to either be the unconditional lover without being the doormat, to have standards, to not baby you, and yet also not be a dick to you and like be like, you're horrible and you're doing all these things wrong, but to be self-worthy of herself, to recognize that connection. And it also helps you see you. It helps you, like, you both have to see yourselves, but oftentimes divine masculine, when you really start that path, the first thing you have to face is your ego. And not in a sense of getting rid of ego, but in a sense of understanding and accepting your shadow sides, embracing your dark sides, and then allowing even those words to be transmuted, to recognize that your flaws are perfectly acceptable. The only person who ever made them unacceptable was you, and by making them unacceptable, you amplified them. And typically, you'll, as divine masculine, you will recognize your feminine not because she is like mothering you, or in fact, you will probably recognize her because she's getting out of your way, and working on herself, and yet not disconnecting from you totally, yet not playing games with you. Just being herself and learning to not take your choices personally. And then you start to go through and transmute your ego, and that is necessary. And divine masculine will often go through stages of first playing the ego pride, making a bunch of messes and blaming it on everybody else, and then and then until there is nobody else to blame, until it is all out and on the table, that there is no way to run from the father wounds and to face them. And then you will hit a point to where you actually start to feel and embody Empress energy, divine feminine energy, because you've been, for however long, avoiding doing your spiritual work and processing your emotions. And then you start to feel how your divine feminine has felt, and you start to recognize that you're, as a friend said, going through the Karma Sutra, and learning about all the positions that you've been put in and that you put your divine feminine in, and also other karmics on your path. But then you start to become more enlightened about that, and once you wake up a little bit, you can't go back from that. You can try to stall and not awaken more, but then the universe just keeps stacking it on. If you thought that you could fake it, that you could just run to where you thought the grass was greener and have all the bells and whistles and be happy with that everything would be hunky-dory. The universe is the biggest clown ever, and it laughs at our human foibles. And in Divine Masculine path, like, it's funny because Divine Feminine path, she learns to stand on her own 2 feet. Like, because of the messes that you're making and the egoism that you stand in, she is recognizing that it is nice to have you there, but it is not needed to have you there. And that she does not need you to give her permission to love you and to be compassionate to you, that she can choose either or. And then as you continue to do your mess making and karmic working outings, you start to recognize her as being that individual, not being, a lot of times as men and as women, we tend to associate that all women are like our mothers. We might not think that consciously, all women are like our exes. And we do with men, all women are like our fathers, or could be, or like our exes. They're all going to do this or do that. But then when we start to hit our divine path, our emperor, empress path, we start to recognize people as individuals. And for divine masculine, that's often a very new thing. Usually divine feminines, or when we're in feminine energy, we tend to take things upon ourselves first, and we tend to think, okay, how can I change myself to be better? How can I wear my hair different? How can I change my makeup or eat or change or do things like that to keep the attraction going with my divine masculine? And that's actually when we're still in karmic energy. But when divine masculine is still in karmic energy, and the emperor reversed, it's the kind of the opposite. It's that I'm not doing nothing to change. You can't control me. You can't change me. I am who I am. Either you like me who I am or you don't. And anytime there's a request for growth or accountability, it tends to go opposite. And then usually either divine masculine will do something incredibly stupid and end things himself, or divine feminine will say, okay, enough with the wash cycle. And then divine masculine will say, okay, I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna do what I want. you know and but at that point, though, when divine feminine actually says enough, and it's strong enough that it does feel like a cut off rather than a temporary break, because we're human and we tend to do that with each other when we're getting ready for the temporary separation, so that we can each learn karmic lessons we could not learn in each other's direct presence and within union. Usually by that time, you can recognize you're hitting the divine masculine journey, because you recognize that you fucked up. And you really want to, if nothing else, show yourself that you are not the person, you are no longer the person that you were. It's kind of torn. It's like you'll likely be in an energy of trying to prove to them that you were never that horrible person. And then you start to recognize, yeah, you kind of were. And you get put with karmic partners who, despite your best efforts of applying all the things that your divine feminine said would make them very happy, the karmic partner that you have is not going to be receptive to or understanding of or in a healed enough state to be able to welcome that appreciation, welcome that evolution in you, because you cannot get there from there. not in the way that it was done, not until you have been accountable. And so the humbling process begins. You get a spiritual humbler added to you, so that everything that you thought that was necessary to be a man in society or be a masculine starts to crumble until you are willing to do the work to heal your mother-father wounds, to recognize whether you've already met your divine feminine or whether she's out there, and to recognize that your role is not necessarily to be a provider for a family, it's to be a provider for yourself, your self-worth, your self-acceptance, and to look for partnership, whether you already know them or not, that is that cherry on top, just like with divine feminine. Because that's when you can have true teamwork. That's when you can have reciprocation. And so we've gotten up to the 30-minute mark. So I guess my final thoughts on this is, divine masculine's role overall, like once the healing is done, just like divine feminine's role is to be that unconditionally loving mother energy that is not a pushover, that does have standards, that is self-worthy. The divine masculine role is very similar. It's to be the unconditionally loving father energy, to be the protector and provider, but not because you have a partner who requires it, who needs you, who can't survive without you, but because you have a partner who can, and you recognize that they choose you, and that, you can be accepted for not having all your ducks in a row because they don't need you to have them in a row in the first place. And it's about learning, when divine masculine role, whether you're man or woman, when regardless of what stage in your divine journey you are, it's about providing the structure without also filling up everything in the middle with unnecessary stuff, without overprotecting, without overpossessing. And it's accepting your light and your shadow, as protector, as possessor, as sometimes as dominant, as receiver, as person who is receptive to feminine energy, who has empathy for it and respect for it, and yet isn't scared of it, and who recognizes individuality and recognizes that not all women are like the mother or like former toxic partners. And that's what it is. Divine masculine's path, where it starts to come back and converge with divine feminine, is recognizing that you are worthy of an easy path. Especially because oftentimes when you manifest karmics, they are going to be a lot like your divine feminine, and they effectively are your divine feminine, but they're an older, unhealed version. And you get the choice. Do you feel like you need to go through and have the hard path of earning that forgiveness? Or are you healed enough that you are able to choose, whether you've already met them or there's someone new to meet, that you are healed enough to choose you and to work on you and to prepare yourself to be that healed person for them without having to have it validated from a partner? And are you man enough, I guess, masculine enough to own your mistakes, to be the father who can say, I'm sorry, to be the father who can say, you can do it, to be the father who can say, I'm proud of you. Anyways, I will go on about this in other videos. This is, these topics are not going to be one video topics. For right now, if you have any further questions, feel free to comment or send them to my inbox. And, work on you, divine masculines, whether you're man, woman, non-binary, etc. Heal those father wounds. Heal those mother wounds. It might be challenging at first, but it will be so worth it.